ethos, social characteristics. Uh, at the same time, we'll have also discussion on his other works. All can be discussed here. MEG-10 uh, is on beginnings of Indian English novel. And while discussing on Indian English novel, we will uh, actually have our discussion on four aspects. Bankim's literary context, his life and views, his age, the social ethos and social characteristics, and his other works. We can have discussion in detail. Participants, are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Clearly, sir.
Uh-huh. Uh, so friends, as you all know, as a student of English literature, you must be knowing that no writer can write in a vacuum. No writer can write in a vacuum. He needs some subject matter. He needs some issues. He needs some actually some pertinent subject matters of his time, and therefore we all know that no writer can write in a vacuum, whether he is a small writer or a great writer. He needs some subject matter, he needs some issues, and a writer is always shaped as such a PD. A writer is always actually intensifies his writing by a range of factors, and such as, what are the factors? Such as the age he wrote in, the age in which he belongs, the class into which he is born, the literary and social issues of his time, that they are concerned, that the writer is always concerned about. Do you understand? A writer is always concerned about certain factors when he is going to write something. A writer is always concerned about certain factors, certain things when he is going to write something. And as I discussed, some factors such as the age in which he belongs, the age in which he belongs to, the class into which he is born, and the literary and social issues of his time. Uh, these are the factors generally a writer takes into account. These are the factors a writer generally takes into account when he is writing something. Uh, uh, Participants, it will be easier on your part to attempt a question if you are in the habit of noting down certain points while I am delivering my lecture. Are you in the habit of noting down? Do you note down while listening to the lecture? Do you note down?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Some of the important points, it will be important on your part to note down some of the points while we are discussing. Okay. Uh, don't simply listen. Try to note down some points while discussing. Anything that comes to your mind while giving a lecture, whenever you receive something, please note it down so that it will be useful on your part to prepare a question. Okay. So, if you want, I can repeat it. If you don't understand, you can ask me so that I can repeat it. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So actually, I wanted to focus on certain points what we are going to discuss about what is today's topic? Participant, what is today's topic?
Beginning of Indian novels.
Beginning of Indian English novel.
Novels.
Indian English novels.
Novel, sir.
And while
Novels.
discussing on Indian English novels, uh, the name that comes first is whose name comes first as Indian as the pioneer?
Bankim Chandra Chatterjee.
Bankim Chandra, very good. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. So Bankim's literary context, it is very important to have a thorough discussion on Bankim's literary context, his life, his views, the age in which he belongs to, the social ethos of his time, his social characteristics, and at the same time we will have also discussion on on his other works in brief. Anyway, all can be discussed here. And as I told you earlier, uh, a writer never writes in a vacuum, never writes in a vacuum. So without the subject matter, without the issues, without the social actually characteristics, a writer generally cannot write anything. So while discussing on the writings of a novel, writings of a writer, we must keep in mind that certain factors actually operate on him. Whether he is a small writer, whether he is a great writer, he always he is always governed by, he is always shaped by a range of factors, by a number of factors, by a number of issues. What are those issues? The age into which he belongs, the class into which he is born, and the literary issues, the social issues of his time. He is always concerned about these issues. So, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee is considered as the pioneer of, uh, uh, I mean, Indian English novel. So, first, we will look at the time of Bengal Renaissance. First, we will look at the time of Bengal Renaissance. Uh, so, it is important to see in this context, it is important to see the literary history of that time, the literary history of that time. uh, the Bankim's works must be seen historically. We cannot isolate. We cannot actually think without the history of his time. We cannot see anything. We cannot see any literary production. We cannot see any literary writings without taking into taking into account the historical background. Bankim works must be seen, therefore, his work must be seen historically, uh, and his work must be seen as pioneering work. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee must be seen as a pioneering novelist, pioneering novelist. Issues like, he always selected issues. Issues like what? Issues like middle class life, centrality of women at that time, moral conflicts of that time, uh, issues like middle class life, centrality of women, the moral conflicts at the heart are all features of his work. While Bankim Chandra Chatterjee started writing mm, writing literary pieces. I will not say novel now. Write literary pieces. Issues like middle class life, centrality of women, moral conflicts at the heart were all the features of his works. And these issues gave him unique position. So these issues actually provided impetus, provided sufficient opportunity to a man like Bankim to start literary writings, and therefore uh, literary writing were of were of very high standard. Literary writings of Bankim were of high standard, and he could also focus on the main issues, the important issues prevailing at that time. He also important to he also wanted to focus on the main issues, important issues prevailing at that time. Uh, Therefore, the issues gave him unique position, an unusual position to write literary productions, to write literary works. Uh, Even though Rajmohan's wife, which is a masterpiece of Bankim, the novel Rajmohan's wife is a masterpiece of Bankim, is not the most evolved of his novels. Uh, it is the first of the series of novels that Bankim wrote about the same kind of issues. So, to put it otherwise, Rajmohan's novel was a successful novel, But though actually it actually received wider acclamation, wider recognition, uh, Bankim always wrote about the same kind of issues, wrote on the same kind of issues. And he were to Bankim also in latter part, Bankim went on to write many masterpieces, many actually great writings like Durgesh Nandini, uh, Bisha Vriksha, Indira, etc., etc. These are also important works of uh, Bankim, all about the nature of human desire. So whether it is Durgesh Nandini, whether it is Vishabrukhya, or whether it is Indira, these are all masterpieces of Bankim. And no doubt, as we discussed, Rajmohan's wife uh, is a different kind of novel, which the other writers at that time actually attached much importance, much importance to that novel, considering the theme, content, coherence of the writer, even the critics also attach much importance to see the work of Bankim, Rajmohan's wife. But his other works like Durgesh Nandini, Vishabrukhya or Indira, they were also not less in rank and repute. They were also not less important in their texture, in their theme, in their content, in their issues. And all his works were about the nature of human desire, or were the nature of human desire. Bankim, friends, Bankim stood out not just as a pioneer, as we say, we consider him as the pioneer of Indian English drama. We consider him as the beginner of Indian English drama. But he stood out not just as a pioneer, but also a maverick. But also a maverick. I use the word maverick, Maverick. Maverick means independent minded man, unorthodox attitude, unorthodox actually temperament, independent minded man, and he was a maverick political writer also. Who Bankim was also a maverick political writer. He stood out not just as a pioneer, but also a maverick political writer, independent minded political writer, independent minded political writer. And that is why ma- he could uh, actually he could take up the issues prevalent at that time and used those subject matters in his writings. He friends, he articulated very powerfully in his writings. Bankim articulated very powerfully in his writings. Uh, he could know uh, that without proper articulation, without frankness, without independent mind, he cannot bring about a good pieces of literary writing. He cannot actually he cannot bring about good pieces of literary writing. He could realize it. Therefore, he articulated powerfully in his writings. He articulated most powerfully in his writings, and they need to uh, the he was a true nationalist. Bankim was a true nationalist. He was an ardent supporter of Hinduism, ardent supporter of Hinduism, and the need to arouse the nation against British rule. He articulated powerfully. He also felt the need to arouse the nation against the British rule, and very importantly, he also played a central role as a nationalist at that time. He also played a central role uh, uh, as a nationalist, as a as an ardent supporter, and he used very. You will be surprised to know that he was never afraid of using, I mean, anti-Muslim vernacular. He was not afraid of using anti-Muslim vernacular in his writing. He used unambiguous anti-Muslim vernacular in his works, actually, which fueled communal hatred. Naturally, a man like Bankim, while writing literary pieces and as an ardent supporter of Hinduism, a true nationalist, was never afraid of using anti-Muslim vernacular. And when he was using anti-Muslim vernacular, uh, uh, at that time, the Muslim was very dominant, and he was in rule at that time. So it will naturally, it is natural that it fueled communal hatred. It fueled communal hatred because he used anti-Muslim vernacular. It fueled communal hatred, and the ruling class at that time was predominantly Muslim. Important thing is that the ruling class at that time, the time uh, to which Bankim belonged, was predominantly Muslim, and that obviously developed animosity against him. So, because the ruling class belonged to belong to the ruling class belonged to predominantly Muslim class, they developed animosity against Bankim. But
Sir, sir, sorry to
Bankim was
interrupt you. Sir,
hello.
this is Gayatri from Gayatri Nanda. Sir, I just wanted to ask you one question. You said that Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, he is writing about the person those who are predominantly Muslim. I didn't
No, no,
understand that.
at that time it was the at that time the ruling class was predominantly Muslim.
The ruling class means what do you mean by that
I
ruling
mean,
class?
the
Because
government was
the
probably
government means
it was
that
mainly
time the ruling.
we refer to the pre-independent period.
Yes,
Ah,
sir. That yes,
so
yes, sir.
at that time the Muslim community were very powerful. So well,
Sir, you
if
mean to say in Bengal, sir? In Bengal, Muslim communities are very powerful.
yes,
Actually, sir, that time also it is being India is being ruled by Britishers. So, which part of this area is being predominantly dominated by Muslims? Can you clarify it, sir?
yes, I could not get your point, madam.
Sir, actually, I wanted you just said that the some that part is being ruled by Muslims. So, which part is being ruled by Muslims, sir? Actually, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee was the poet of pre-independent period. So, in pre-independent period, India is ruled by Britishers. But you said it is that area is mainly ruled by Muslim people.
Yes.
So, so which area, sir? Can you please clarify?
No, no, no,
That part I didn't get.
no. Actually, we want to actually underline the fact that Bankim was fearless. While writing, Bankim was as I told, he was an an independent-minded man, and while writing, he used anti-Muslim vernacular in his writing. So he was fearless. He was not afraid of even the Muslim class. That is what I want to underline,
Okay,
madam.
sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
So, so in the literary map of Bengal, in the literary map of Bengal, his role was very pivotal. In the literary map of Bengal, his role was very central, and uh, his prose style was also less monotonous. His prose style was also less. Generally, the prose style becomes monotonous because of verbosity, but his prose style was also not less. It was less monotonous because Bankim reduced the verbosity. Bankim reduced the verbosity. Therefore, the prose style of Bankim was less monotonous. And uh, history, a past fictional work was his. Bankim's first fictional work was Rajmohan's wife. This was serialized in Indian field in the year 1864. His first fictional work was Rajmohan's wife, uh, and which was serialized. At that time, it was serialized in Indian field in the year 1864. Next to Rajmohan's wife, Durgesh Nandini was also published in the following year, which was Bankim's first Bengali romance. Durgesh Nandini, it is also considered as one of the masterpieces of Bankim, and it was published in the next year, in the year 1865, and it was his first Bengali romance. And Bankim also his hands, tried his hands. He also tried to write two major works such as Raj Raj Simha in the year 1881 and Anand Mat in the year 1882. In two consecutive years, two masterpieces, Rajsimha and Anand Math, also Bankim tried his hands successfully, and both Rajsimha was published in the year 1881. Anand Math was published in the year 1882. Uh, One was a historical fiction and the other was a political fiction. Rajsimha was a historical fiction, whereas Anand Math was a political fiction. So, in Anand Math, Bankim wrote about the Sannyasi rebellion, and politically significant, which was politically significant at that time. That is why it is considered as a political fiction. Anand Math was the best known work of Bankim. Anand Math was considered as the best work of Bankim. As we all know, Anand Math was also best known for the song in it, Bande Mataram. It was really during Swadeshi. It was during Swadeshi movement that it became a slogan, and slowly its popularity spread through the entire nation during the freedom struggle. So, Bankim was Bankim was a successful writer, and these actually two great books, Rajsimha and Anand Math, actually received recognition even from his critics, and therefore, while though it belonged to without history, one was, as I told you, one was a historical fiction, the other was a political fiction, and history of that time, the Rajsimha depicted the history of that time, and Anand Math depicted the political situation of that time, particularly the problems of sannyasi and their rebellion. And participants, uh, it is also very important to actually concentrate our discussion on the age and the social ethos, social issues of his time while we are discussing Indian English novel. Therefore, the age in which Bankim lived and wrote was a transitional age. The age in which Bankim lived and wrote was a transitional age. In many ways, foreign rule was dominant, foreign rule was expedited. The transformation of Indian society from the medieval to modern, and the coming together of the two cultures, three of several accepted beliefs for questioning. The whole traditional system of education had been gradually rehauled by the time Bankim was born. Traditional system of education had been gradually rehauled, and by the time Bankim was born, English education was a well-established fact at that time. Because the time, because we are discussing we are discussing the pre-Indian periods development. Therefore, English education was a well-established fact at that time. The split between those two are those who had benefited from it and those who had not was very pronounced. English actually education was well-established fact, and the split between those who had benefited from it and those who had not was very pronounced. So therefore, Bankim started his career uh, as a writer. Uh, well, depending upon the situation, depending upon the issues, depending upon the characteristic, depending upon the social ethos prevailed at that time. And there was an admiration for the uh, ruling race which reigned contrary to the discrimination of the Indians felt. Bankim was a product of these two strongly opposed national sentiments, the colonial sentiment and the Indian sentiments. He was a product of these two strongly opposed national sentiment. It was this English educated middle class which created a new literature in different Indian languages, especially in 19th century. And uh, Bankim's first novel,
Sir,
Rajmohan's Wife,
uh,
is written in
sorry to
English.
disturb you, sir.
Uh, Hello.
Sir, you said that Bankim Chandra Chatterjee is strongly opposed of two sentiments. One is called Indian sentiment and one is
But
called
he,
foreign sentiment. How we
huh,
can say,
yes, madam.
sir, how we can say that he is opposing Indian sentiment?
No, he actually the two the two sentiments were running high at that time. As I told you, the English sentiments and the Indian sentiments. And because he was a nationalist, naturally he will go in favor of Indian sentiments. Ah,
Yes.
but as a writer, he had he was very cautious while writing. As a writer, he was very cautious to balance these two sentiments. To balance these two sentiments, and Bankim was very. That is why I told you he was a product of these two strongly opposed national sentiments. Could you understand
Yes.
my point, madam?
Sir, product of sir, on that only I am unable to understand. You say that, sir, though he's an Indian, how he
Hmm.
can oppose Indian sentiments, sir?
No, no, he did not oppose Indian sentiments. He did not oppose Indian sentiments. He being a product of these two sentiments. Well, two sentiments was running. Two sentiments at that two sentiments were running parallel at that time. But naturally, Bankim as a true nationalist, as an ardent supporter of Hinduism, will go in favor of Hindu sentiments. Ah, will go in favor of Hindu sentiments.
Okay.
But he had to compromise. As a writer, he had to compromise and he had to manage the flow of two sentiments, the colonial and the Indian.
Okay, sir.
That is what I wanted to say, madam.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
So, his first novel, uh, uh, as said, his first novel was, I mean, Rajmohan's wife, uh, written in English, written in English, and in many ways looks forward to a trend of English educated heroes with modern values as opposed to traditional heroes. The Bankim's first novel, Rajmohan's Wife, is written in English, and in many ways, this novel looks forward to a trend of English educated heroes with modern values as opposed to traditional heroes. The Bengali novel is coming years was to produce a spate of anglicized graduates from Calcutta University, wearing European clothes, eating food forbidden to Hindus as a gesture towards progressive English values. The lukewarm success of Rajmohan's Wife and perhaps Bankim's own sense of unease, UNEAC, own sense of unease made him switch to Bengali as his medium of writing. And when Bankim switched to Bengali, he began writing historical romances he began writing historical romances and writes about prevalence of romanticism, uh, his challenging of certain accepted conventions, his passion for beauty, his restless mind are all symptoms of romanticism. But he did not actually react against society in the way the European romantics did. A challenging of certain accepted convention, his passion for beauty, his restless mind are all symptoms of romanticism, but he did not actually react against society in the way the European romantics did. His desire for change remains strictly guarded by conventional notions of morality. Bankim's desire for change remains strictly guarded by conventional notions of morality. Therefore, there is at the heart of his novels an unresolved tension between passion and duty, which we will have to underline in the context of Rajmohan's wife, as well as a couple of his other stories. According to certain critics, most of Bankim's historical novels are set in the medieval period. These would include a lot of his major works, as we discussed, Mrinalini, Durgesh Nandini, uh, uh, Chandrasekhar, Devi Chaudarani, and Anand Bhatt, and many others works of Bankim. The past is deployed very consciously for the didactic purpose to re-establish patriotism, to re-establish self-sacrifice, chivalry, as well as to have more exotic settings with places, uh, castles and intrigues and sacrifices. So he, through his writings, he wanted to re-establish patriotism. His novels about contemporary life, his novels about contemporary life are mostly located in small villages. As in the beginning, as we discussed in the beginning, a writer never writes in vacuum. He needs some social issues, he needs some social characteristics, he needs some social ethos. Uh, and rightly, Bankim in his novels, he, his novels about contemporary life are mostly located in small villages. His chief characters belong to the propertied class, even though his canvas is wide. It includes domestic servants as well as landlords, from lower strata to the higher strata, lords as well as musicians. His description of everyday life are detailed in his writings. His descriptions of everyday life are detailed, fairly vivid, uh, uh, properly articulated, which make him a precise chronicler of his times. Bankim also wrote on social issues as well as religious and philosophical matters. He always felt that primary duty of literature was to create beauty that cleansed the mind, that cleansed the mind, that purified the mind, that solemned the mind. He always felt that the primary duty of literature was to create beauty that solemns the mind, that cleans the mind, that purifies the mind. He felt that the chief function of literature was to purify the mind rather than present the readers with admirable role models. He always gave importance to these things. While he was writing, Bankim felt that primary importance should be given to the given to uh, purification of mind, cleansing of mind, and he felt that the chief function of literature was to purify the mind rather than uh, present the readers with admirable role models. He said, Bankim said, poets were not preachers. Poets were not preachers. But in later works, he did not maintain this distance he talked about. And therefore, after 1880, there is a distinct change of position that is evident from works like Anand Math, where his political desire to raise consciousness overrides the earlier beliefs. As we discussed, Anand Math is a political fiction uh, in which uh, Bankim raised a very prominent issues of that time, the rebellion of sannyasi, and Anand Math, a political, therefore, it is marked that after 1880, a distinct change of position that is evident from his works like Anand Math, where his political desire to raise consciousness overrides the earlier belief in maintaining an aesthetic distance. In Anand Math, Bankim is very keen on infusing a sense of national pride, national patriotism, national pride, national patriotism, and popularize a patriotism that was otherwise lacking at that time. Very important. Very important for you. Anand Math, where his political desire to raise consciousness overrides his earlier belief in maintaining an aesthetic distance. And in Anand Math, Bankim is very keen on infusing a sense of national pride. He also at the same time wanted to popularize patriotism that was otherwise lacking at that time. He tried to marry patriotism with religion, and wherein arise the problems with Bankim. As has been mentioned earlier, as we discussed earlier, as we mentioned earlier, Bankim equated nationalism with Hinduism. Bankim equated nationalism with Hinduism. As an ardent supporter of Hinduism, as a true nationalist, he always wanted to arouse a sense of nationalism among in his writings. And through his writings, he wanted to give a message, a wider message. And Bankim equated nationalism with Hinduism, which led to the Hindu right-wing later appropriating his works for their own divisive purposes. Very Bankim work here actually his when we are studying the work of Bankim, it can be summed up. His position as being neither one of the complete revivalism nor one of a complete westernization. He rejected the latter option according to Sarkar, Tanika Sarkar, uh, Stanika Sarkar in her uh, incisive study on banking on Bankim uh, makes a comment, sums up that Bankim position as being a neither one of a complete revivalism nor one of complete westernization. He rejected the latter position, the latter option, according to Sarkar, because of a specifically Bengali guilt about having accommodated and colluded with foreign rule. And Hindu revivalist, nationalist as a political formation in the last in the last part, uh, natural it is actually this group was particularly influential during the agitation against the age of against that backdrop, against that background. And in this, therefore, it is important to locate Bankim in his period in order to be able to access his role in the growth and development of Bengali literature. We have also seen how novel itself was at a very early stage of development, and Bankim as a pioneer Indian English novelist. His writings were wide and eclectic in ways that changed and influenced the history of the realist as well as the historical novel. But Bankim's role was not limited to that of a mere novelist, to that of a beginner of Indian English novel. He wrote on politics, he wrote on philosophy, he wrote on religions, and uh, so therefore it is hard to sum up his political leanings towards his later life, for he grew closer to Hinduism and the traditional views that were part of it. In But Bankim's role was not limited to that of a novelist. He wrote on politics, he wrote on philosophy, he wrote on religion, and uh, uh, as a pioneer, as the true beginner of a of Indian writing, Indian English writer, his role cannot be therefore his role as a pioneer can always be underlined, can always be attached importance. It is hard to therefore it is hard to sum up his political leanings towards his later life, for he grew closer to Hinduism, the traditional views that were also part of his writings. So, friends, with this, I sum up the topic today. On this blog, you are expected to get questions like uh, what, according to you, is Bankim's unique contribution to the literary map of Bengal? Maybe one probable questions. The other questions which you may get on this section can also be uh, estimate Bankim as a true nationalist. What do you understand uh, uh, by nationalism according to Bankim? What were Bankim's views on the
Sorry,
reformist
sir.
movement of his time? These are some of the questions which you are supposed to get, uh, supposed to
Sir,
come.
I want to ask you one question. You
Uh,
said that estimate Bankim as a true nationalist. So when
hmm.
we are explaining this question, is there any need to refer the written writings of Bankim, so that what he has written and how he, like suppose for example, you said that in Anand Math he used to give the political fiction. So, can we give the example of that novel in his in the answers,
Anand Bhatt.
sir?
On
Anand,
and
you said,
Anand Bhatt is considered as a political fiction.
sir. So, can we give this type of example in our answers?
You can give examples. So if you get a question on that, you can get it. But so actually, we have not gone deep into the matter. We have
Okay.
not gone deep into the matter. We have not discussed in detail about the content of the novel Anand Bhatt.
Yes.
So when you are going to make an attempt to write an answer, you can also write. You can also mention in your answer about the political fiction, Anand Bhatt being a political fiction of that time.
Sir,
Uh,
actually, I have a doubt regarding this
Many
answer.
portions, see, many portions are left untouched.
I
Uh,
know it. You are giving only the summary of this block, but
in 1 hour, it is not possible. Actually, it will take minimum 4 classes, madam.
yes,
Uh,
sir. I know it. I know it, sir. But
Actually,
though
this
we
is
have not
time is
written, but
very insufficient. Time is insufficient. So we are just simply we should not teach. But in my case, I am giving more teaching than counseling. Uh,
yes, sir. I know it.
in fact, I
Others,
am giving more teaching. I should give some of the highlights all over the all over the actually all over units, but it is not possible in one period. It is not possible to touch all 4 or 5 units. Therefore, I am trying to keep some of the highlights so that it will be useful to you to have some knowledge about uh, Indian English novels, some knowledge about Indian English writings. Uh, because many portions are here, many actually relevant portions are left. Many relevant portions are here, but but I am not able to cover up. I am not able to touch because of the constraints of time.
sir. Sir, actually, I just wanted to ask you that if a question comes, like you said, estimate the Bankim as a true nationalist. So,
Uh-huh.
what should be our answer? How we should write? Like we should write that how he, in his writing, how he saw that he's a nationalist, or through the exam, through his novel, we can say that
In
we
Madam,
can
so
give.
in our answer, we will always justify Bankim as a true nationalist, and we will also give a number of examples which actually sufficiently support Bankim sentiment as a nationalist, Bankim sentiment as a true nationalist.
Okay, sir.
In our answer, we should give examples, sufficient examples, to prove that Bankim was a true nationalist.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir, I would like to say something.
Yeah, tell me, madam, are you able to follow me properly?
Sir,
Or is there any problem in understanding?
oh no, sir. No, I understood, sir.
Like, there
Sir,
is clarity in clarity.
confusion.
There is clarity.
So that's why I asked this
Is
question.
there any lack of clarity in teaching?
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, I would like to say something.
Uh-huh.
Sir, there is a question in an assignment, sir.
Uh-huh.
Sir, would you agree that Bankim's Rajman's wife has a number of melodramatic features? Give reasons for your answer. Sir, how do you approach these answers, sir? Any suggestions, sir?
On what point?
Would you agree that Bankim's Rajman's wife has a number of melodramatic features? Give
Melo,
reason for your answer. There is a question
Melodram,
in our assignment, sir. How would you approach this, sir? Any suggestions?
melodramatic.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Melodramatic. So far, our discussion actually, as on today, we don't find any mention of melodramatic yeah, features in Bankim's writings. We don't find, we don't, there is no mention of melodramatic style in his writings. Of course, I cannot say if you go, if you read the other chapters of Bankim's, there may be there may be mention, but so far as I know, there is no mention of melodramatic features in Bankim's writings.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your guidance.
आज बहुत पिला थिले रे 42 टा केतरा थिले
अछन ना
हाँ